next Sunday.
We're going to attempt time travel. Avoid the planet Earth at all costs.
Captain Kirk and the crew journey to Main Street, USA.
Don't tell me you're from outer space.
No, I'm from Iowa. I only work in outer space.
William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy.
You sure this is such a bright idea?
Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
And to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Star Trek, I'm very pleased to present the first ever series of Star Trek collector plates featuring the key members of the Starship Enterprise crew. On the first plate is my illustrious friend, Mr. Spock. Now, it captures all of Mr. Spock's superior intelligence and calm demeanor. A remarkable likeness, I would say.
I think it has some beautiful writing. They can get away, because the characters are true, they can get away with saying lines that if they're thrown in another movie, you say, oh, it's just a bunch of, that's phony, it's broad emotion. Here, there can be a conversation between Spock's father and Spock that touches us. Because they have these characters down cold. They've kept the team together, which is usually what doesn't happen in most sequels.
They not only have kept the team together, but Leonard Nimoy is the director again this time, and he has developed into quite a good director. I think he moves things right along. It's nice that the people who originally made the Star Trek saga are now still controlling what happens with the movies, instead of somebody else with bright ideas to turn it into George Lucas or Steven Spielberg or something.
The ending to Star Trek III feels conclusive in a way. The Genesis planet is destroyed, Spock is resurrected, and that's it. However, I wonder how many moviegoers were puzzled by the caption, "The adventure continues," that appears before the end credits. If there was to be a Star Trek IV, what exactly was there left to resolve? According to the supplement material on the Blu-ray, producer Harve Bennett and some of the writers began to really look carefully at the continuity between each movie to avoid any forgotten threads or plot holes, so they could tie up any loose ends left over from the previous entry if they were to be explored. Well, Admiral Kirk and company did some damage to the Federation by disobeying protocols, stealing the Enterprise, destroying it, and increasing further difficulties with Klingon peace talks, so that had to get resolved somehow. As mentioned time and time again, Star Trek entries 2, 3, and 4 were one long narrative, and they all depended on where the last one left off, thus determining what direction to go into for the next one. And if Star Trek 4 was to happen, it really needed to be something special. Thankfully, Leonard Nimoy returned not only to reprise the role of Spock, but also jump into the director's chair, given the studio gave him free will to do whatever he wanted. And given how the last two entries were a little heavy-handed and carried some unique baddies, Nimoy wanted to go in a different direction. Instead of going darker, he decided to go in a more lighter route. And thankfully it resulted in not only the most successful entry involving the original cast, but perhaps the most mainstream of the Star Trek movies. The Voyage Home begins with Kirk and his crew called back to Earth so they can face the Council for the list of crimes that have piled up on their tab. On the way back, a giant alien cylinder appears that kinda looks like an overcooked candy bar with a disco ball nightlight attached to it. Anyway, it starts to cause some havoc to the climate because it's having a hard time trying to find something. The Enterprise crew discover the alien's calls are similar to the humpback whale and theorize it's trying to communicate with them. Trouble is, the humpbacks are extinct in the 23rd century, so they decide to use the Klingon bird-of-prey ship they acquired, the Slingshot around the sun, in order to go back to 1986 and bring some whales back to save the future. It's not like time travel is something the TV series has done before, and I do love time travel movies. Exactly how the physics work in presenting the ability to travel back in time here still puzzle me, but I'm willing to let that slide given how much fun this one is. Coming off Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, it made sense to go in a different direction. You either go darker or lighter. Director Leonard Nimoy really wanted to take a break from doing something heavy like the last one. In any shape or form, this could either succeed or bomb. But the idea of seeing the future visit the past is a novel idea enough. And it works so much better when you see them confused with contemporary life, while also poking fun at it.
Why don't you watch where you're going, you dumbass? Well, a double dumbass on you!
It makes for a Star Trek feature that doesn't date itself given how far they go with the concept. You have the Enterprise crew trying to figure out how they're going to transport 2 humpback whales to their own time, getting supplies to do so, and eventually locating said species. It manages to juggle around in different plot lines to give the crew something to do for a change. McCoy and Scotty are trying to create the glass that will hold the 2 creatures, Uhura and Chekhov seek extra power for the ship so they can get back home, and Sulu is trying to find a way to transport supplies. No one feels shortchanged, and they get a funny line or two that works well. To describe the bulk of why this movie works would involve going over every single scene that happens, and that would ruin the fun. But I guess to give an idea, here's a selection of my favorite moments. Uhura and Chekhov are downtown trying to find an army base that carries nuclear materials to help get energy for the ship. Of course, the comedy's elevated by Chekhov's mispronunciation.
Excuse me, sir. Can you direct me to the naval base in Alameda? It's where they keep the nuclear vessels.
Just hearing them casually ask where they can find something like this feels like an on-the-street style Eric Andre sketch.
Man, we're plagiarizing YouTube because we're out of ideas.
And it only gets more hilarious seeing the awkward reactions of the police nearby. Then you have Spock and Kirk trying to blend in with society, and they do all they can to act and appear normal. Even right down to pawning key possessions just to get cash, as there's no use for money in the 23rd century.
Does it mean exact change?
I just love that line. But of course, the one moment folks remember is their encounter with a punk on the bus. This is someone who wants to feel like an outcast as opposed to fitting in. Kirk and Spock, on the other hand, feel indifferent about his small, social rebel nature.
And I hope you're blue too. We're all bloody wetland.
Supposedly, this gag was actually a deleted scene recycled from Time After Time. A sci-fi time travel flick that Nicholas Meyer worked on, and ironically enough also contributed to this entry as well, which might explain how the gag got ported over from one movie to another. But most interestingly is who played the punk rocker here. One of the movie's producers, Kirk Thatcher, who would also move on to do tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of countless Muppet projects, including supplying the designs for the characters on the live-action sitcom Dinosaurs. But what do I know? I'm just the Muppet enthusiast here. There's also a small sub-mission where Chekhov is mistaken for a Soviet spy, given the Cold War tensions were going on at the time. During escape, he is injured and needs to be rescued as the medical technology in this time period would kill him. So McCoy has to go in, repair the damage to his brain with the right tools, and get him out of the hospital while he still can. But what I love the most is seeing McCoy's observations in the hospital, comparing that to the Middle Ages.
A simple evacuation of the expanding epidural hematoma will relieve the pressure.
My God, man. Drilling holes in his head's not the answer.
Just gonna croak, just like that.
Well, what about Gottlieb?
What do you expect? All we talked about was image therapy. I thought they were gonna punch each other out.
Unbelievable. My God, what is this, the Dark Ages? How do you explain slow impulse, low respiratory rate, and coma?
Fundoscopic examination.
Fundoscopic examination is unrevealing in these cases.
It's such a simple idea, but his reactions get the best laughs from me.
Do you have a different view, Doctor?
Sounds like the goddamn Spanish Inquisition.
He even goes as far to cure one of the patients who has kidney issues. Well, just be glad you didn't go back to the Middle Ages, McCoy, or otherwise you'd have a stroke over the methods applied by Theodoric of York.
You'll feel a lot better after a good bleeding. But I'm bleeding already. Say, who's the barber here?
The biggest centerpiece of all is locating the whales they need. Turns out, a local aquarium is looking after a pair that is set to be released, and Kirk is having a difficult time trying to acquire them from the scientist who's looking after them, played by Catherine Hicks.
We're only trying to help.
The hell you were, Buster. Your friend was messing up my tanks and messing up my whales.
They like you very much, but they are not the hell your whales.
I do like how dedicated she is to her work and gives reasons for why she's concerned about releasing the captive whales. It's more than just being personally attached to an exhibit. There is a double-edged sword of how they can survive in the wild with the prospect of whalers nearby.
To hunt a species to extinction is not logical.
Whoever said the human race was logical?
And I enjoy her chemistry with William Shatner when she struggles to take his words seriously that he's from the future and is trying to save her whales. There are some genuine funny and cute moments that come out of their interactions.
The problem is that they won't be that much safer at sea because of all the hunting this time of year. Where could you take them where they'd be safe?
Well, it's not so much a matter of a place as of a time.
Yeah, there's this whole element where she doesn't believe him and eventually finds out, but it's performances from Hicks and Shatner that keep this interesting.
Be glad they did not go with their original choice by having Eddie Murphy in this role. Besides, it would have been really distracting to see Axel Foley in a Star Trek movie. Besides, he was working on The Golden Child at the same time anyway.
On top of that, you also have Spock getting a character arc as well. Even if he's returned, it's not really the same Spock we deeply know. Sure, he's half Vulcan and half human, but Spock is having a hard time trying to cope with things like understanding emotion being social, given he was just resurrected and only comprehends with the alien side of himself. It plays into a lot when they go back in time and try to fit in. Because Spock is more in tune with his Vulcan side, his will to be human is not fully there. Even key aspects of his culture, like how Vulcans have to be honest and can't lie, play big into it.
You guys like Italian?
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
No.
no.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I love Italian.
I like the earlier scene when he's taking a test and focusing on the questions of knowledge, that suddenly a simple question like, how do you feel, is what trips him up. It becomes a deep part of the entire movie where characters are just lost in communication and trying to understand one another. Which makes the whole fish out of water aspect more unique, as the Enterprise crew have to use their knowledge of the future in order to survive the past. So when Spock finally comes to terms with his human side, there is a payoff to it. It doesn't happen immediately, but it comes fittingly right near the end. Without giving too much away, there's a part where Kirk's on trial and Spock joins him.
Captain Spock, you do not stand accused.
Mr. President, I stand with my shipmates.
Because that is what the old Spock would do. He would stick out for those who matter, and after seeing his friends risk it all to save him, Spock not only returns the favor, but shows how much his friends mean to him. It's a small, subtle moment, but works so much better after seeing 2 movies where your character's killed off, brought back to life, and then understands what it means to be human.
And this is exactly a big part as to why The Voyage Home works so well. You feel like everyone is having a good time bouncing off each other, and is just having fun with this entry. This so easily could have been a movie that centered on Kirk, Spock, or McCoy, but here, everyone matters to the story. Everyone has a part. Everyone has a scene, and it's just enjoyable all around. I'm never dull or for once thinking the movie's dragging along. I'm actually invested in seeing what each group is doing to save the day.
The idea of them bringing back giant water mammals to the future is so absurd, but their determination and willingness to make it happen really keeps your interest. It's something that could have easily bombed or written off as silly, but the way the story is written and how the performances play out make it feel effective. I actually don't mind the fact they never give an explanation as to why the giant alien cylinder wants to talk to whales, and left a big mystery. You could argue the being wanted to hear them sing or understand their view of humanity from a secondary source. It's left open enough for the audience to make their own interpretation because that's not the main focus. It's about these characters we've grown to enjoy over the past couple of movies and want to see them set things right. And when they do accomplish something, we the viewer feel like we're part of that voyage as well. And it feels so rewarding after so much turmoil to finally return to the place they call home.
With that said, is The Voyage Home the Star Trek movie I love the most? Well, you'll be surprised to know that it's not. Nor is it one that I like to come back often to. Whenever I think Star Trek, this is not it. Usually the first 2 that come to mind is either Wrath of Khan or The Undiscovered Country.
In fact, I have no problem in saying Undiscovered Country is my personal favorite, given we get to see these characters one last time, and it's fitting to wrap up the Klingon situation for the show's 25th anniversary. It felt like a proper goodbye and a unique send-off to an incredible cast of characters. I already covered this movie on an episode of Vaulting, and you can check that out if you want to know my thoughts more. I don't hate Voyage Home and respect its decision to go in a different direction, but there are two things that keep me from really putting this into my top 5 favorite Star Trek movies. Call them nitpicky, but they gotta be mentioned. First, when it comes to time travel movies, this is not exactly what comes to mind. Normally, I turn to stuff like Back to the Future or Time After Time because you do feel the stakes are raised. There are moments in those films where it feels like a literal race against time, and I feel like there are more risks taken in those ventures. Second, given the Enterprise crew is going back to collect 2 humpback whales, why did it have to be the ones at the aquarium? What's so special about them? I guess you could argue it's out of convenience given they are close by, and if they didn't, the whalers would most likely get them. But couldn't they have easily built the tank and tried to abduct some over the Pacific Ocean? It feels like obtaining any humpback whale could have easily fixed the problem regardless. But I guess this clip sums up what Voyage Home is trying to be.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
At the end of the day, it's just created to have fun, and it is. It's an entry you're not supposed to think too hard about, but just see how the crew will solve the problem. It plays to their expectations and delivers more on entertainment. I mean, isn't that more important than trying to wrap logic and reasoning? It's science fiction, just basic fact with a fantasy twist to show that it could be possible in some way. And hey, I've heard non-Star Trek fans actually find this one easier to get into compared to the others. I kind of chalk it up to the concept itself, given how fun it is to see modern-day life seen through the viewpoint of people from a different century. But I still say seeing the previous 2 make the ride all the more worth it, given how key loose ends are tied up here. There's a great moment at the beginning where Sarok, Spock's father, defends Kirk while the Federation is questioning his accused crimes. It may not seem much to one seeing the sequel the first time, but it's deeper knowing what Sarok had seen of Kirk go through to help his son, and here he tries to return the favor. It's a tiny character beat, but feels like a big payoff when you consider the continuity of the previous 2 into play. Of course, the adventures of the original Enterprise crew didn't stop there. There were 2 more sequels before the Next Generation took over. Yet, it's these 3 specifically that are worth checking out. Keep in mind, this is before those cinematic universes we have today made it feel like a necessity that each movie had to be connected to each other in one single form or timeline. Today, it just feels like overkill, or there are cases where it feels like they're trying to jump ahead without proper build-up. With the Star Trek Trilogy, however, it's so unique to look back and marvel at how the directors and writers took creative decisions at a time when making sequels were a big gamble. Each entry took a risk that brought them in different directions that made them stand out while still feeling deeply connected. This is one of those rare cases where I can't recommend one over the other. The narrative among them is so deeply spread throughout that you need all 3 of them. I'd even argue the 6th one works well as a nice epilogue. You have Kirk trying to overcome his prejudice against the Klingons, and it does feel like a nice send-off for the crew one last time. Either way, it's not often you come across a series of movies where the storyline is very cleverly stretched to the point it doesn't overstay its welcome, and does leave the door open for how the next one would continue where the last left off.
Now, I might not be a diehard Trekker, but I shall repeat the same words I said right from the start. This is one trilogy you should see. Until next time, live long and watch a good movie.
Take me to the river, drop me in the water. Take me to the river, drop me in the water. Don't know why, love you like I do. All the trouble that you put me through.
Cut.
People to this day say, I haven't seen any Star Trek. I'm not a Star Trek fan, but I saw the one about the whales. And that always gives me kind of pleasure because I think, again, of the street scene in San Francisco, of the bewildered Trekkie crew wandering on the streets, wondering which way is up, and nobody paying any attention, which was wonderful because that was the point. Here they are, and here we are.
The Swallows return to Capistrano.
MacArthur promised to return.
The 40s return.
The 50s return. A punk return. A tax return. But the greatest return of them all is the return of the Pink Panther.
'Tis my business to look at trouble.
Peter Sellers in The Return of the Pink Panther. Rated G. General audiences.